1, 2, 3, testing. Espresso with the EDPS. Data protection began in the 70s and the 80s when the first computers and data centers were born. This caused some societal concerns, somehow similar to the concerns we have today with the eruption of artificial intelligence, and this led to the adoption of legislation in some countries. Over the years, as access to computers generalized, data protection became a fundamental right in the EU treaties and the European Charter of Fundamental Rights. These fundamental rights puts in place a system of checks and balances, allowing personal data to be processed, because this is very important for public services and businesses, but only where appropriate and with fairness towards individuals. The first international organization working on data protection was the Council of Europe, which adopted Convention 108 in 1981. This treaty, which is open to all countries of the world, was amended and modernized in 2018 into what is called now Convention 108 Plus. One decade later, in 1995, the European communities at the time adopted the precursor of the GDPR, the so-called Data Protection Directive. This legislation, typical of the internal market, ensured a high level of data protection and the free flow of personal data between the member states of the European Union. The Data Protection Directive remained applicable until 2018, almost for an entire generation. But over the years, information technology evolved very rapidly, and it became clear that further clarity and further harmonization was necessary. In 2016, after a lengthy discussions and intense lobbying by interested parties, the General Data Protection Regulation was born, coming into force in May 2018. The General Data Protection Regulation is the gold standard of data protection. More than 150 countries have passed legislation inspired in the GDPR around the world. It is a human-centric legislation anchored in the principles of privacy by design, accountability, and a risk-based approach. Citizens have rights that they can enforce with the help of independent data protection authorities, and companies must comply with the obligations and limits laid down in the law, so the data is handled with care and the people behind those data are treated fairly. The GDPR also created the European Data Protection Board, whose secretariat is provided by the EDPS. This EU body brings EU national data protection authorities together to ensure a consistent and coordinated interpretation and enforcement of the GDPR. The GDPR and data protection are key to uphold our EU values, including democracy and the rule of law. Over the years, it has become one of the flagships of the European Union.